Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm coming at you with another Noblefrugal Studio collaboration video, where I basically paint out this background, and eventually, once I'm finally finished with this background, I'm going to go ahead and submit it over to Noblefrugal Studio, which is a channel on YouTube ran by a guy called Sebastian. Sebastian's going to go ahead and grab this background and animate a complex scene on top of it using open tunes. So I'm looking forward to that, and if you guys are looking forward to that, then feel free to look at the video description below. He's got a nice teaching style. I do recommend his teaching style and all that good stuff, so if you guys would like to take a look, yeah, feel free to take a look at the link in the description. So in this video so far, what you're clearly able to see is I'm adding some shading to everything. So I created an empty layer. I'm using kind of a dark blue color, just simply because I like blue, and I thought it would really look good in the image. And the layer is applied to, it has a blending mode applied to it, and it's multiply, and that seems to work really well. Now, I did a lot of experimenting with this video, for the image and all that. Not all of it worked at all. Like, a lot of this was experimental stuff, and so if you wind up seeing some of the things that I did that were experimental and you have a better idea as to how to do it, I'm all open for suggestions, because there are some things that I'm familiar with conceptually, but in terms of actually doing it, I'm not familiar with it. So, things like that can kind of slow me down occasionally. By the end of the video, I'm not really happy with how the road came out, so I'm thinking about redoing even still a little bit more work, especially where the road is concerned and such like that. And here you see me getting rid of some of the shading that I did, because I really liked the glow effect that I got with a lot of these windows, and it gave them a reflective quality, and it doesn't matter if they're in the shadows or anything like that. And so yeah, that really helped me out right there. And occasionally you've seen me do this multiple times. Basically what happens is I'll create a layer, and I'll select everything, or select something, or color in these statues, all in black. And the reason for that is because I need to include the statues in on a blending mode of some sort. Here, with this little fence on top of this building here, I didn't really know how to proceed, because the old sky was showing right through, and I now have clouds and everything, and so it was like this gigantic eyesore. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to bring the new sky through all the holes in this fence. And so here, I didn't like how it was all coming out, so I decided, okay, well, here's a better workflow, drawing a straight line and then deleting. Yeah, that's good. Just erasing straight lines and drawing straight lines. That sounds good. And then later on, since it's ultimately a layer mask that I'm using here, at least that's the term instead of Photoshop for it, what I decided to do is, with the actual painting layer, I just grabbed a brown color and just colored a big blob there, and then used the mask to basically draw out the fence. And so that worked out pretty well, and I'm happy with how the end results turned out. I mean, they could have been a little bit better, but ultimately this building is a little bit off in the background a little bit, and I really kind of don't think that this building will ever even really be seen by the camera inside of the animation. I mean, it all depends on what Noblefrugal Studio has in mind. I mean, I I'm still not happy with the results, so here I draw out a guideline layer, which gives me kind of a basic rough idea as to where everything needs to be. And then it's at this point, like I said earlier, that I start pulling out a brush and I just draw out a blob. Right now I'm just masking it all out, so that now since I already drew out the blob on the painting layer, I went ahead, here I'm actually drawing out the fence with negative space, basically, with the mask. And so that worked out pretty well. The only thing that I'm not really too happy about is how it goes off towards the distance to where it's so far away that you can't see the holes anymore. It does kind of get to be a little bit jarring how it goes from having holes in the fence to all of a sudden just being pretty solid, but everything turned out moderately well. That building over there, you know, the one with all the little pillars and stuff like that to the left and such, something happened with the stairs. I need to fix that. Really annoying. And you know, you'll make a decision and you know, something subtle might get affected by it, and so you have to redraw things occasionally. I mean, you know, I have set a goal to get this done by the 30th video, and the 30th video is coming up. If I could get it done before then that'd be great. Here, you know, I had to learn a little bit about brushes and such like that, like how to make your own brushes, and I don't pretend as if I understand all of it, like how to make a brush, but I at least got something done, at least not at this point. At this point, I'm just using the default brushes, and I erased everything that I did. Here, I'm just trying to draw everything out manually, and then after a few minutes of that, I'm thinking, gosh, this is gonna take forever. There's gotta be a better workflow. And so yeah, I wound up making a brush and everything. I spent probably about an hour or two just researching ways to make brushes, and even still, I still don't think I understand everything, even though I probably should at this point. But yeah, I went through a lot of material, and still just kind of have a rudimentary understanding. And some of it's just that I'm sitting there watching a tutorial, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, yep, I need to meet my deadline, come on, hurry up, that's how I feel with these tutorials. And yeah, just, it is what it is. But eventually, you know, I do start applying a few photo textures. With the grass, I feel like it turned out really well. You know, I grabbed a photograph that I took forever ago of some grass before it started getting so cold that all the grass died. But it was still cold. The grass was kind of dead, but the texture was still preserved. And so I started to apply the texture, and the texture wound up being the best part of the grass, even after I wound up actually creating the brush that I settled with and wanted to put everywhere. Now, this right here, what you're seeing on the screen right now, this was a brush that I made, and I thought, yeah, you know, it turned out okay, but it's such a low opacity, and so I had to keep on clicking multiple times and hope that I don't wind up with these weird ghost patterns and stuff like that, where there's a bunch of little replicated patterns all over the place. Hopefully, just hoping each time that I could just tap on it in the same place until the opacity was high enough. And so I had to research how to do it with, you know, how to make the brushes a little bit better again. And at that point, that brush right there, the final brush, really worked out. But with all the foliage, all the grass and stuff that goes along the edge of the sidewalk, for some reason I wasn't able to get a brush that would work there. and so I had to keep on copying and pasting portions of it. And yes, you can rotate a brush, but for some reason, like, it seems like whenever I look up a tutorial, it's like they see a visual representation of the angle of the brush when they rotate it, but for me, for some reason, I couldn't see that at all. So it was all just guesswork. It gives me some degree that it went ahead and tilted the angle of the brush, but I can't see it until I exit out of the menu, and then it's just like, okay, well, you know, I can only use a menu blind for so many times until I finally get it right, and then I get fed up with experimenting. So it's at this point right here that I pull out a black brush, and I go ahead and I start creating a grass texture. Now, some of these decisions that I made here, I kind of regret, because, you know, yeah, you know, this looks like a nice little cartoony looking type of grass here, but once I applied the grass photo texture, a lot of this didn't really fit in very well. So I need to bring back the painting. And that's something that I've mentioned multiple times, and this is something that a bunch of professionals caution about. You'll wind up applying a bunch of photo textures, and what'll happen is it'll stop looking like a painting. It'll look like some weird, uncanny painting hybrid, and it won't look right. And it'll look like some photoshopped weirdness. And I understand the caution that these professionals are presenting out there for people that are learning. Yeah, you don't want to apply a bunch of photo textures and just call it done. You want to bring back the painting into the painting. Even though I've spent forever on this. Now, you know, this has all been a big work, like, learning process. Like, my next painting, what I'm thinking about doing is, I saw this really interesting way of creating thumbnails inside of Photoshop. However, the way the guy did it seemed a little tedious, and I actually found a better way of applying the same technique, just a modified version of it. And ultimately what you wind up with is a really super basic, like, grayscale painting, and that winds up being your thumbnail. You blow that up, and then you just keep on refining you just keep on refining this grayscale painting as you move along, and that really does appeal to me to some extent. And I've never really done grayscale painting before. I've experimented with it in the past and actually just got kind of frustrated with it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not capable of doing it. You know, I've thought about this. You know, I have this photograph. I got this photograph that I've always liked. I like looking at it, and I thought, what if I were to turn that into a grayscale painting right there? Just kind of turn this photograph into a black and white image, and then just kind of paint the color back into it, just so that I can learn how to do grayscale painting. That way I don't have to spend hours and hours and hours painting something and, you know, possibly fail in front of, you know, 700 and close to 40 people on the internet. Yay, that sounds appealing. I mean, I kind of felt the same way with this project, the Noblefrugal Studio project, where I was terrified to paint this particular workflow on camera, basically, because what happens if I fail? I mean, I fail in front of a bunch of people. ultimately, my biggest frustration is just how many times I've repeated the same thing over and over and over and over again. I'm not afraid to show you guys failed attempts at something like what I'm doing right now. So I went ahead and I apply this photo texture here. And what I've found for photo textures is Photoshop Soft Light as a blending mode applied to the layer. Like when you press Control E to merge layers, it seems like it preserves the blending mode pretty well. I mean, I could be wrong, but seems like it's doing okay. But yeah, like my main problem here is, I want to apply this texture everywhere, but it seems like now I can deal with the fact that some of the joints aren't lining up and such like that, and I can change up the fact that it's a repeating pattern. Actually, you know what? Actually, a repeating pattern inside of masonry is actually a good thing. So, whatever. But the problem is when I try to apply a second picture, it stopped having the ground plane. And so here I am messing around with this clone brush, and then it just occurred to me, this is pointless, because as things get further and further away, things get smaller and smaller. So, it's not going to get smaller and smaller because all I'm doing is duplicating what's already there. So I wound up eventually deleting all of that, and then I'm like, okay, well, maybe this can span the distance across the street. And, these are the exact same sort of, they're not tiles, and they're not really quite brick. I'm not really quite sure what to call them. But basically they are something brick-like that's kind of dry stacked into the ground on top of some road base. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, well, somehow I need it to span all the way across. That way I don't have a repeating, like a situation where I tried to apply two pictures and it doesn't share the same ground plane, where it looks like one picture is going downhill and the other one's going uphill. That sort of issue. That's the issue that I was having with. And so I thought, well, maybe if I put them side by side, I won't have that issue. And as you can see, like, now I have a bunch of them that are just different sizes and such like that, and I didn't like that, so I got rid of it. Somehow I need to fix that issue. Maybe just having a few of those, I'm just going to call them bricks, a few of those bricks laid out here and there, and just spacing them out, and not necessarily having it be a globally applied texture. Maybe that would be better, but I'll have to play it by ear because I don't know how it's all going to play out. Now here I got the grass texture and all that, and there were occasions, and this is something that people make a comment about. They say, oh, well, you use the clone brush a lot and you get repeating textures. Well, if you keep moving your source for the clone brush, then you don't have that. And occasionally when I did notice a repeating texture, I wound up using the eraser, and it ultimately I turned one of the airbrush brushes into an eraser. You just do that by pressing E on the keyboard. I just use that. I would just erase some of the most obvious parts of the repeating texture, and then clone brush from a different source, and then kind of like blend it in around in variously different areas, and that seemed like it got rid of the repeating texture. And so then here is kind of a situation where I made a weird decision. Well, is it here? I'm not really quite sure. No, yeah, I got rid of all that stuff with that. So here's some cinder block, and I thought, well, maybe if I get rid of the joints and then clone brush into the joints, then maybe it'd look better, work out a little bit better and such like that. And then I threw it into Krita, and I could still see the weirdness from the joints. So I got rid of the areas that had joints originally and just used one cinder block. And I didn't like that, and so I decided, okay, well, maybe if I just apply it to a section and then clone brush it everywhere else, that might work out. In the end, I'm looking at it from, the area that's close up, and it just seems like that is an awful lot of texture. Maybe if there's a number of things that I could do. I can do it again, only make it much smaller, with a lot less, I don't know, gray. Make it more transparent, I guess. And I'm thinking maybe just lowering the opacity is all that'd also be done. Here I'm trying to get rid of some of the detail off in the distance, just by blurring some of the detail on the road and then progressively making more of a blur off in the distance for this texture. So here I select even further and apply another blur, and that technique seems to work, but I'm not quite sure if I'll keep that. And then I tried out an embossing filter, and that didn't seem to work out, and then I got to see all my mistakes with that particular texture. And so I'm thinking, yeah, a lot more work needs to be done with that texture. But in the end, I do feel as though it turned out pretty well. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't like it, please like, share, and subscribe anyways. There's a lot of work that goes into these videos. And if you guys would like to take a look at any of my other videos, feel free to click on any of the videos that are appearing on the screen right now. Thank you.